Everyone. Welcome to Lunch and Lawn. During our session, all participants will be muted to help reduce the unwelcome background noise and the echo feedback. And also, if we have any issues with our coverage, you might want to turn your video off so that we have more bandwidth. The Lunch and Lawn program is sponsored by the Fairfax County Master Gardeners Association, which operates under the Virginia Cooperative Extension program of Virginia's two land-grant universities, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University. Master Gardeners share science-based information about gardening and horticultural topics. Today's session is the fifth of our 6 sessions to talk with you this season about lunch and lawns and weeds. My name is Gardener Ann, and I'm joined here on today's panel by gardeners Linda and Miriam. Our program today is divided into 3 parts. First, an introductory topic, and today we're going to talk about lawn fertilization. Second, we're going to talk about 2 weeds that are popping up right now, and we call those weeds of the week. And finally, our panel will address some of the lawn questions that have come in during the registration. So I'm Ann Mason, and with the Fairfax County Master Gardeners. And now that it's early fall, you might be asking several questions about fertilizers. Today, in our 5th Lunch and Lawn session, I hope to demystify this topic. And at the end of this presentation, we hope that selecting a fertilizer will be easier for you, as well as when to fertilize, how much to fertilize, and all the steps involved. We're going to focus on cool season grasses, but all the information I'm presenting today is from the turf research done by university experts, and some of the better resources will come at the end of this talk and are also shown in embedded in some of the slides. Now, our first look is at pH, because pH controls the availability of nutrients to our roots. For turf grasses, 3 nutrients are vitally important: nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium, often called the water-soluble form potassium oxide, which we're going to refer to as potash. Other nutrients are important, but generally our soils have enough of those levels as long as the pH remains between 6.2 and 7. So why do we fertilize? Well, as you can see, nitrogen is an essential component of the enzymes and proteins in turf tissue to support shoot and root growth. But nitrogen is a transient nutrient and does not last long in the soil, which is why we need to periodically add it to our soils. Besides adding nitrogen as a fertilizer, allowing your cut grass blades to stay on the lawn adds nitrogen back into the soil. And if you can tolerate clover or microclover in your lawn, the bacteria in the root nodules will fix nitrogen in the soil and make it more available to turf grass roots. So both grass clippings and clover offer the homeowner virtually free nitrogen. Now, phosphorus in the form of phosphate, or potash, as we're going to call today, is essential for establishing the roots in turf grass. Most of our Northern Virginia lawns already have enough phosphorus, so it is not needed unless you are planting new seed or your soil test indicates that you need to add it. Potash is an essential for proteins to make sugars and starches, important ingredients to maintain turf blades, the ability to stay upright and resist lawn diseases. So let's look at a typical soil test. When you get a soil test back, you can see that you need to have, when you take your sample, you need to have identified the crop. In this case, we've got lawn maintenance, bluegrass, and fescue, and that's our most common turf grass in Northern Virginia area. And you probably have heard our standard phrase, don't guess, soil test. And a soil test tells you a lot about your soil and what you need to grow plants. In this case, we're going to grow turf grass. So first, you see this soil test is for bluegrass and fescue. Second, we look at the pH. The pH of this soil is 6.6. So we don't need any line recommendations at this point. Then we look at phosphorus. And phosphorus is in the high zone, 36. Remember, I said that most of our soils in Northern Virginia have a lot of phosphorus. So we don't need to add that either, unless we're going to do a new seed renovate our lawn. And then we look at potassium, the potash, and we see that that's also in pretty good shape. So this soil test tells us that we don't need any phosphorus or potassium. What we need to do is add nitrogen. Now we're going to use this soil test in all of our discussions going forward. But when you get your soil test back, your results back, or you may have them back, follow this pattern. So you might ask yourself, when should we fertilize? So let's understand a little bit more about the growth pattern, because that helps us understand when the turf grass needs nutrition. It's just like supper. When are they growing? So cool season turf grasses include tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, and blends of these two. Cool season turf grasses like humid conditions with cool 60 to 75 degree Fahrenheit air temperatures, while warm season turf grasses grow better in hot temperatures, but they are brown all winter. So timing for fertilizer needs to match when our grasses are looking for nutrients to help it grow. So using these images from Dr. Mike Goatley of Virginia Tech, we can see that there are very definite time growths for our grasses. The season in both of these images is across the horizontal axis, and the growth is in the vertical axis. The red line depicts shoot growth, and the blue dotted line depicts root growth. And the green dashed arrow line depicts the sugar levels, and that relates to photosynthesis. So what we're going to focus on is the cool season growth pattern on the image on the left. Now let's start in the winter time, where we see that the red line shows medium growth and the blue dotted line shows a rising growth, and that's in the yellow bar. The shoot growth continues until the springtime. As air temperatures climb above 75 degrees into our 90+ degree summer temperatures, both shoot and root growth are at their yearly low. This explains why cool season turf grasses turn a little brown in summer. They are at their stressed, slow season because of the heat. Summer is never a time to fertilize cool season turf grasses. But you'll see in the image on the right, it's pretty much the opposite. In the summertime, that is the time to fertilize warm season turf grasses. So when you continue over here, when you get into the fall, you see that both the shoots and the roots are in active growing season. This is our primary season for renovating our lawns and for fertilizing. So let's look at the maintenance calendar that is offered by Virginia Tech. As you can see in this highlighted in green, that's what we've just seen in the images in front, that late summer and early fall are the best time to establish or renovate our cool season lawn. The yellow bar with the capital X's is the best time to fertilize. And when we fertilize, we use a starter fertilizer to boost root growth. After seeding, experts recommend waiting until the grass is mowed twice before applying another fertilizer. If you're not reseeding, you can fertilize once or twice during the fall, depending upon the type of nitrogen in your maintenance fertilizer. And we'll go through both what all these fertilizers are in the next slide. So nitrogen fertilizer are either water soluble, and you can see that they are applied at different rates, or they are water insoluble, which is what WIN stands for. And that just means that it's got a coating on the granule that allows a slow release of nitrogen. And you can see the application rate is higher of the nitrogen. So recalling the growth cycle chart, you'll see that the roots will be active growing in the spring. So in the spring also, you can apply a water-soluble nitrogen, but note that the level of application is virtually half what the application is in the fall. So now we've made our decisions. We see that the best time is the fall. So now let's look at what's on the bag. On the fertilizer label, you'll see three numbers with dashes. The first is nitrogen, the second is phosphate, and the third is potash. So as you ponder the fertilizer standing in front of all of the offerings in the store, you'll say, now what is it that I want? Well, let's assume that you're renovating your lawn and you're putting down new seed, in which case you'll want a starter fertilizer that has some nitrogen, lots of phosphate, and a little bit of potash. But let's just say you have enough phosphate, and you're not renovating your lawn, you just want to do your fall application. Then you want to use a maintenance fertilizer, and note that you have lots of nitrogen, no phosphate, and some potash. So this is a maintenance fertilizer. Now, if your soil test tells you that you need some of these other nutrients, the phosphate and the potash, then you'll want to use a complete fertilizer, and you'll be guided by the soil test in terms of what these numbers, the phosphate and the potassium, should be. So now that we know we have 3 different types of fertilizer to choose, let's look at the nitrogen levels, because that's the most important thing for our lawn at this time. So water-soluble nitrogen is quickly available. It's in an aqueous, it dissolves quickly in water. And when you apply it as a granule, it can burn your grass leaves. So water immediately after the application, because what you're trying to do is get that granule down to the soil level so then it can disperse into the soil level to the roots. If you just leave it on top of the blades, it's not going to do anything except burn your grass. In contrast, a water insoluble is a granule that's coated with a wax or some kind of a coating that allows slow release of the nitrogen that's available. There's less chance of your grass burning, and it's also less chance of leaching. So now that we know a little bit about our nitrogen, let's look on the label for what the fertilizer has. Now, the fertilizer you have may be different than this guaranteed analysis, but if you just follow this as a pattern, you'll see what needs to be done. On the label, you've got 16% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus or phosphate, and 8% potash. But note here that this total nitrogen, 5.6%, is water insoluble nitrogen. What does that actually mean? How much water insoluble nitrogen is there? You might at first glance say, well, it's 5.6%. The label tells us so. No. What it is 5.6% of 16%. So you need to do a little math. 5.6 divided by 16 equals 35%. So the total water insoluble nitrogen in this fertilizer is 35%. Total available nitrogen is water insoluble nitrogen. Well, why is that important? You take this 35%, and Virginia Tech offers a terrific publication, the Lawn Fertilization in Virginia, and it has 3 different cases depending upon how much nitrogen you have in your fertilizer. And it's the water insoluble nitrogen that you're going to use. Knowing that we have 35% water insoluble nitrogen, we come and we see that we have a choice of less than 15% water insoluble nitrogen, 15 to 49% water insoluble nitrogen, and over 50%. So our fertilizer of our example is in this range, and that means that we are in October and we need 0.9 pounds of our fertilizer per 1,000 square feet for our cool season grasses. Now, also note that Virginia Tech tells us what these numbers are for the fall, for the spring, and note that the numbers again are across April and May, not per month, but across the season. And they are significantly less than the September and October fertilization rates. And note, no fertilizers in the summertime. So now that we know we need 0.9 pounds of fertilizer of 35% water insoluble nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, we go to the next phase, which is how much do we buy? More math. Here's our 0.9 pounds over 16 pounds gives us 5.6 pounds of fertilizer per 1,000 square feet. And I've just made up a number for a yard where we have 7,000 square foot over 1,000. So we need 7 times this 5.6 pounds for 39 pounds per 7,000 square feet. So we need to buy 40 pounds of nitrogen, of fertilizer. Okay, we're going to take this, remember this 5.6, because this all builds on one another. Now
how do you apply the fertilizer?
Well, there's 2 different ways. The first is a drop spreader, and this is really good for granular fertilizers because it gives you a fertilization within this, however wide your bucket is. Generally, they're 18, 24, and larger. And when you apply the fertilizer, you're going to go in 2 directions, up and back and up and back, and then in perpendicular. Now, when you get to the edge, you want to stop your fertilization because you don't want the fertilization to be super heavy here. So you want to go, stop, turn, go, stop, turn, go, stop, turn, all the way around and all the way through your property. When you do this, note that we had in our example 5.6 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Because you're making 2 passes, you wanted half that. So it's 2.8 in each pass per 1,000 square feet. Okay, the second thing is you have this spreader and you may have a catch basin and you can see the scale, but that scale is only an approximation because granules come in different sizes. And so the fertilizer manufacturers provide you some information to get started with on the fertilizer bag, but it's really important that you actually do the math. How much area are you covering? So you want to calibrate your your drop spreader. You can use this catch pan, or you could spread a sheet of plastic or something to catch your granule fertilizer. So you're going to set up how wide your spreader is by a distance so that you get a number in square footage. Because you know that in this example, you wanted 2.8 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So how many in 100 square feet do you need to apply? The spreader is going to be calibrated if it's within 5% of the goal. So you want to collect all of this and weigh it. And that is how you tell whether you have a calibrated. And you keep calibrating it until you get about the right percentage that you're looking for. Now, the second way of going about this is rotary spreader. Rotary spreaders are generally used for spreading grass seed, but you can use it for spreading fertilizer. But you'll note that you collect when you collect your granules, you'll see that the granules in this test example are higher in the middle than they are in the end. So when you're making passes using a rotary spreader, you can't go perpendicular and crosswise like you did in a drop spreader. You really need to make sure that your overlapping tails are overlapped so that you have enough fertilizer in this area. So what have we covered? And why did we do all that math? The soil test is our guardian angel. It tells us how much fertilizer we need and what types of fertilizer we need. We also went through the types of nitrogen. We have water-soluble nitrogen, and we saw that if you use water-soluble nitrogen, you can apply it more frequently, but you apply it at a lower application rate. Or you can use water-insoluble nitrogen, and there you only apply it once or twice a year at a higher application rate. We've also seen that grass clippings are a form of slow-release fertilizer, so just leave them on the lawn. There's no really need to bag them. And importantly, the water-insoluble nitrogen determines your application rate, regardless of what spreader you use. It's the water-insoluble nitrogen is your determinant. So here are some of the resources that I've used in this talk, and I really recommend many of these resources because these are really great to help demystify all the math that I've covered so very quickly. They go through it in greater detail in these documents. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions. Susan, do we have any questions from the chat box?
Sorry, I was on mute. I do not see any yet.
Okay, very good. Then let us go to our other fellow panelists. So Gardener Linda, you're going to bring us the weed of the week. What are you bringing us today?
Thank you, Gardener Ann. I'll be discussing wild garlic. It's a grassy grass. It's a member of the lily family. It's a cool season perennial, non-native, originally from Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Wild garlic grows late fall through early spring. It is one of the first weeds to emerge in the early spring. In the summer, it dies back or goes dormant. It thrives in thin turf and bare areas where the soil is poorly drained and finely textured. It grows in areas of infrequent and no mowing, such as flower beds. Now it's October and the weed is no longer dormant in my flower beds, the wild garlic is popping up. It also grows along fences and sidewalks. The leaves of the wild garlic. Wild garlic produces long leaves, a height up to 24 inches at maturity. They are slender, less than half an inch in diameter, and at times appear curved or curled as shown by the arrow in the upper photo. They are dark, covered with a waxy substance. The leaves are smooth, round, and hollow as shown in the lower photo. It also has a garlic onion odor when cut or mowed. The flower cedar heads. Wild garlic grows from a perennial bulb. There's no branching of the leaves. They are long and slender. There is only one stem or leaf per bulb. The bulblets form at the base of the larger bulb underground. The leaves emerge from the underground bulblets covered by a thin papery scales or membrane. The flower cedar heads, the bulblets, also appear at the top of the stem and clustered into a spherical shape. Flowers may appear on the uncut stems, which appear in late spring to early summer. The flowers can be white, red, pink, or purple. Are there similar plants to the wild garlic? Yes, the wild onion. On the left photo is again the wild garlic. The leaves are long, slender, dark, and hollow. The key feature being the hollow leaves. Its cousin, the wild onion, in the right photo, the leaves are flat and solid. They also have a waxy substance. The key feature is the flat and solid leaves as indicated by the arrow. And you can also see the seed heads in the center of the photo. Well, how do we control wild garlic? Proper turf management, such as proper mowing, 3.5 inches to 4 inches, fertilization, and irrigation to develop a dense, aggressive turf leading into the winter months may help to manage the wild garlic. Conditions that favor the growth of the wild garlic are mowing the lawn too short and inadequate fertilization of the turf grass. Mechanical control. Hand pulling can be done when the weeds are young and the soil is moist. If the soil is dry, saturate the area around the plants and then gently pull. Although hand pulling is generally not an effective method of weed control, since the hollow stems can be easily broken, leaving the bulb below the soil to generate new leaves and new bulblets. Thus, the best method may be to dig the bulblets. Chemical controls. Herbicides should be used as a last resort as a potential risk to people, animals, and the environment. Read the product label carefully. If you're going to use a chemical control, spot treat with selective post-emergent products that include the active ingredients 2,4-D or 2,4-DP. The surface of the wild garlic is a waxy-like. It would also be helpful to use a surfactant, which is a sticky or wetting agent, to help the chemical treatment adhere to the plant. Additionally, mowing the weeded area prior to the application may improve herbicide uptake and control. The next slide are my references. You can see I used Virginia Tech, Penn State, Purdue University, the University of Maryland Extension, Clemson, and Kansas State.
Well, thank you, Gardner Linda. That was really great. But let me ask you, I have wild garlic growing in my yard, and it's popping up. It's really doing thriving growth right now.
It is right now.
Can I eat this?
Yes, wild garlic is edible. The leaves, flowers, and the bulbs. It can be used similar to chives, although the leaves are a bit tough and the bulbs are fibrous. A note of caution, if you're going to eat the wild garlic, be very careful not to consume any that you've gathered in areas where you have chemicals or herbicides that have been applied to your lawn.
Great, that's very good. Always be very careful about what you eat out of the garden. It could be poisonous or it could have chemicals on it. And also be very careful about having dogs munch on the wild garlic and the wild onion, because that's a toxicant for them.
That's true.
So I see we have a couple of questions on the lawn. We'll answer those just before we start our overall questions. So we're going to turn now to Gardener Miriam. Gardener Miriam, what weed are you bringing to us today?
Thank you, Gardener Ann. I'll be discussing hairy bittercress. This is truly a weed that keeps on giving virtually all year round. Because of the plant's growth habits and strategies for seed production, it functions as both a summer and winter annual, making control in turf a challenge. This member of the mustard family, Cruciferae, typically flourishes in full sun and poorly drained sites, but once established, it can outcompete any turf. Now, looking at the structure of this plant provides a lot of information about why it functions so effectively as a pervasive weed in turf. Hairy bittercress has a dense basal rosette of compound leaves with rounded leaflets at the base of a stem, with one or more elongated stem leaves. The plant is from 3 to 10 inches tall, with small flowers and 4 stamens at the tips of the stem branches. Mature plants have elongated tap roots, which can be a problem in weed control. The purple stick-like seed pods surrounding the flower are the most interesting characteristic of this weed. At maturity, the seed pods coil and pop explosively, firing off seeds at a distance of at least 6 feet. These seeds germinate quickly and produce seedlings throughout the growing season and can continue with vegetative growth, sometimes through the winter. Because of the numerous seeds produced and the prolonged vegetative growth, this is often the first weed of the spring, sometimes popping up through the snow.
Gardener Miriam, how many seeds can a plant typically produce?
These weeds are seed banks. Each pod produces about 20 seeds, and the average plant produces about 600 seeds. A large plant, though, can produce up to 1,000 seeds, and this continues on throughout the growing season. And you can see in this video, you can see the seeds flying through the air as these pop and release the seeds just by touching them. And so they definitely are able to spread very invasively. Now, control practices for hairy bittercress are based on good turf management practices, the ones we've discussed before, good drainage, appropriate watering, proper mowing height, and sharpened mower blades. Mowing also chops off the seeds before they mature and prevents germination. And pulling and digging is also effective, particularly when the soil is moist and the plants are young, before those tap roots become too elongated to pull out, because that's very difficult. Seeds are very sticky, so clean tools carefully to prevent seed spread, and chemical control as always, should be used as a last resort because of potential risks to humans, animals, and the environment. Now, the chemical control, for this, the preferred time to treat is in the fall, with herbicides that are selective for broadleaf weeds and not turf. These are the following herbicides that are effective: 2,4-D plus dicamba, 2,4-D plus dicamba MCPP, 2,4-D plus dicamba plus triclopyr, 2,4-D plus 2,4 plus dicamba plus penoxylum. So the next slide are my references and resources, and all of these are excellent resources and go into somewhat more detail than I've presented.
Well, Gardner Miriam, thank you so much for that presentation. Having seen that video and then having experienced this plant in my garden with the seeds popping everywhere, I've often wondered, what's the typical life cycle of this hairy bittercress? How long does it take to grow?
7 weeks.
Sorry.
Which is very short.
You're frozen. You're frozen a little
with
Miriam,
on the
but I heard
period
you
of
say
emergence
7 weeks.
with growth in warm and cold weather. So because of this, they're an extensive period of, they're very difficult.
Great, thanks so much. So let's turn to some of these questions in the chat box first. There was a question about about how much the grass clippings provide. And generally, as Tony has mentioned, everybody, it's about 30% of all the nitrogen needs for the yard. But also remember that when you're cutting your grass, you're cutting just 1/3 of the grass blade at a time. So you're not cutting, you're keeping on top of the mowing. So you're cutting just a little bit at a time of your turf grass. But leaving that clipping on the soil really is okay. And it does not build up thatch in a cool season fescue Kentucky bluegrass lawn. So about 30%. And Mr. Thomas asked if with the broadcast spreader, we should not go in 2 directions. Correct. The broadcast spreader is circular in pattern. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that your pattern, the tails are overlapping, but you don't need to go in that perpendicular pattern that the rotary spreader did. Okay. Let's see, is there any more questions?
Yeah, there is another question. How do you treat these weeds in the landscape garden?
Okay. I'm assuming that is both weeds. Is that right? Well, let's start with Wendy. Is it both weeds, Wendy, or is it?
Yes, it's both weeds.
Okay. So,
Well, with wild garlic, I would gently take your trowel and gently dig it up so that you're not breaking off, the hollow leaves and leaving the bulbets in the soil.
so you want to get all the bulbet out of the soil.
Yeah. Yes. So
Okay.
I wouldn't do any spot treatment because I would fear that would harm any of your landscaped perennials or shrubs, or I'd be afraid to do that.
Okay.
As far as the hairy bittercress goes, I had a terrible infestation of this when I first moved into my house, and I have completely eradicated it just by hand pulling. But again, it it's easiest to deal with when the soil is very moist before that taproot gets too long. And when you extract it, you have to make sure you get that taproot. But I found it, despite its very bad habits as far as spreading seeds, I found it easy to get rid of. I haven't seen it in a couple of years in my beds.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's turn to the questions from our registrants. So Mr. Thomas asked that his grass seedlings are drying out and what should I do? So who's going to take this one?
I'll take this, Gardner, Ann. So I would recommend to lightly water the new grass daily in the morning and frequently, because you want to keep it moist, and this allows the roots to develop. Now, is Thomas here today? I thought I saw there was a Thomas.
Yes, Mr. Thomas, if you don't mind unmuting, we'd like to ask you some questions.
So, Mr. Thomas, when did you plant your grass seed? And like, what type of grass seed did you plant? A cool season or a warm season?
I planted it on August 22nd, and it was a tall fescue that I bought from the Seed Superstore. It was a blend of 4 tall fescue variants that were all approved by Virginia Techs, that were recommended by Virginia Tech's Extension Service.
Okay.
Okay, so that sounds good. So you did it the appropriate time. Did you keep it moist and watered?
I did. So as I'm answering these questions, I should also mention to you that, in fact, the problem has reduced quite a bit. We've had a little bit of rain since then.
Great, because I was going to ask how they're doing.
Right, so things are getting a lot better, but I'll go ahead and answer the questions anyway. So please go ahead.
Was it a new lawn or a renovated lawn?
It was, well, let me put it this way. It was a renovated new lawn, and it's kind of an odd thing for me to say, but what happened is I made a mistake. I tried growing a new lawn by planting in the spring, and that failed miserably right around the June, July timeframe. So I started doing some research, and I came across your publication that said, don't seed in spring. So I realized I'd started wrong. And so I postponed, I decided, okay, I'll just kill off everything and start over in fall. That's what I did. So yes, you would consider it a renovated lawn, but it was a new lawn that failed. So I consider it a new lawn.
Did you happen to aerate it, or did you put any top dressing down?
I did, yes. We aerated it, but we also tilled the soil in. We rented a tiller from Home Depot, and we tilled in some leaf compost.
Right.
To about 4 inches, I'm sorry. That took a long time, but I had read that was something that was worth doing, so we did that before we seeded. And then we seeded and rolled with one of those water rollers, filled about a third full after seeding and fertilizing.
So you said that your seeds are better right now. Was it all of the seeds that turned brown, or just part of the seeds?
It was part of the extreme tips of the shoots were turning brown. And the interesting thing is, right when they started turning brown was when they had reached the height for their initial mowing. So we went ahead and mowed our initial mowing with a reel mower, a push mower. And ever since we did that, it's been doing a lot better. So it's almost like that dry or brown part of the seedlings got chopped off, and what's left is thriving. So I don't know.
So that's great to know.
Yeah, it was quite a relief.
So I wanted to just put another plug that we did have a session of a lunch and lawn, and we talked about the different types turf grass you can buy, and when to apply your maintenance, when to do the aerating and the fertilizing and all that. So you might go back and take a look at that as well for tips. That was done on September the 9th, and so that's on our Fairfax Gardening YouTube site, so you can take a look at that. But it's great to know that your turf grass is getting much better.
Thank you. I will take a look at those.
Yeah.
And this session has been very helpful. I really wish I knew about this before, so I'm glad I discovered this.
Thank you.
Tell all your friends. We're going to be on, this will
Spread
be
the word.
on YouTube.
I will.
Now, did you fertilize at the time where you did your initial seeding?
Yes, I
This
applied,
in August.
correct, August 22nd. I applied Anderson's starter fertilizer, the one that has the mesotrione built in. Because of the weed problems that we had in the summer, I thought I'd use something with a weed suppressor to begin with. So
Okay.
we used that, and I'm just getting ready now on this Columbus Day weekend to apply the last round of fertilizer for this fall.
And now you know all about calculating your nitrogen.
I do, exactly, and that's great. And I was going to use a broadcast spreader, so I'm glad I learned that I don't have to do it in two directions. That's very helpful.
Right. Okay.
Hey, Anne, we've got a question. I think it fits in here. It says, if I haven't overseeded yet, is there still time to do that?
Oh. Do you want to take that, or should I take that? Miriam? Linda?
It's getting, well, it might be a little bit, mid-October is really the last point that you should be doing the overseeding. That would be my recommendation. So you have just, looks like about a week here.
Well, the thing that with seeding is it's temperature dependent and it's sunlight dependent. And so now that our sunlight is getting, hours are getting shorter, that's why we're not really, we have an ending point, and we're down in the waning part of actually doing any seeding. You can still do it, but it's going to be, it may be less robust in springing up. So you may have an opportunity to get some seed down at this time. But as Linda has said, it really is, time is of the urgency. Get it done now, because you're going to be mowing, and then there's going to be grass leaves, grass.
Breaking of the leaves.
Rising. And we'll talk about that in our next lunch and lawn on the 21st. But you're also, the leaves are going to start to fall. And as you're raking, you want to have the grass rooted enough that you're not pulling your little grass seedlings out when you're raking. So time is of the essence in getting ready to get that seed down. Okay, let's go to our next question. Stephanie asks about bent grass. Miriam, are you going to do this one?
Sure. This is a creeping, or it's a perennial, cool season grass. It's primarily used in golf courses. It's very high maintenance. When it's popping up in a lawn like this, it's out of place. It has a bluish cast to it, so it's very apparent in a lawn. The best thing that I could think of is somehow to do a spot treatment, which is either mechanically pull it out or chemically spot treat. And there are some selective herbicides, tenacity, and then non-selective herbicide, but you run into the problem of also killing the turf. And so I think that those are the only two options for getting rid of this. I think because it's so visible, it would be easily mechanically pulled out. But those are really your options on treating this, but it is nice. It has the clear visibility in a lawn because of that blue cast to the leaves.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gardner Miriam. I don't see Stephanie online. Is she online, Susan? I don't see her.
I don't think so. No, I don't see her.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Okay, so our final lunch and lawn is on October 21st. It's about winterizing the lawn. And our two weeds will be Japanese clover and nimblewill. Nimblewill is really robust right now, so many people will be interested in that. So please join us for that. And we want to thank you for attending this session. And our resources, all of the facts, we have fact sheets for all of the weeds that we've covered during our entire lunch and lawn series. And they are at fairfaxgardening.org, and you'll be able to see them. I have a slide in just a minute. And we also have all of our 6 sessions will be on the VCE, the Virginia Cooperative Extension, Fairfax County YouTube channel. And all of our sessions are there, as well as our virtual plant clinics presentations. So we've got some great presentations this year. And as always, the Virginia Tech publications are right there at the ready for you to look at for more information. So here's our Fairfax Gardening website, and you will see on the home turf page our lunch and lawn weeds. Each one of these has a fact sheet. Here's a picture of our VCE YouTube channel, and you can see we have lots of great presentations that are throughout the summer. We've been doing them 3 times and now twice a week. Our next session on our virtual plant clinic is on Thursday at 7 p.m. and it's going to be on organic or local, which is best. So thank you for attending this session. And I really greatly appreciate Gardner Linda, Gardner Miriam, and Gardner Susan for all of your great support during this session. So goodbye all.